Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on December 20th, Saturday, 2014 at 14:40 in the afternoon Eastern Time. Now, my grandson Carter was 6 years old yesterday, and I had sent him some birthday greetings via other channels, but I thought he might like to see this on a video from his granddad here. So happy birthday, Carter. Love, your granddad Kersey. All righty. He's cultivating teeth right now, as well as going to kindergarten. So he's busy in his own way. Now I'm going to use this opportunity to reply directly to a fellow named Griffin84, who's out of Norway, and he had jumped into this god awful cold lake, after pouring a bucket of cold water on his head. I guess he was doing sort of a belated, ALS bucket challenge thing. And I had said, good thing the diving reflex didn't kick in. And he had queried me back and said, what's the diving reflex? And I thought I'd remark on that briefly. Excuse me. Good Lord. The diving reflex is, in marine mammals, in any case, the reflex that allows them to close off their airway, and then with other adaptations that they've evolved over the years to have in terms of survival, in terms of the way their cells use oxygen, their blood delivers oxygen, and so forth, allows them to stay submerged for upwards of 30 or 40 minutes or even an hour at a time in very cold water. And the cold water, of course, they tend to get a little drop in body temperature and all that, and that lets them not metabolize as fast. Well, in very young children up to about the age of 3, and actually in very, very, very fit, athletic people up until their late teens and early 20s, if you put cold water or a cold object suddenly onto their face in the area of their trigeminal nerve innervation, the sensory innervation of the trigeminal nerve, you can trigger this diving reflex, and what happens is you get an intense vagal response, and it slows the heart rate way, way down. You'll get heart rates down as low as 30 or 20 beats a minute or less. And it also then the airway, the ninth and 10th nerve, they shut the airway off. And see, that's what lets these kids that fall into ponds be fished out after an hour and still be able to be resuscitated, because that very primitive reflex is still operative in some of these kids at that age. And it's not so much operative in the older teenagers, but what does happen is it slows their heart rate way, way down, and it becomes a bit of an adventure. Where that was relevant to me in my anesthetic practice was, occasionally they'd bring one of these people in, and you'd have to try to warm them up, and in such a way that you wouldn't kill them while you warmed them up. And Of course, the impulse is to start their, give them something to make their heart beat faster. No, 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 no. You don't want to do that. That's one of the few times you don't want to do that. And it was, and it was, sometimes these kids can be resuscitated out of this and warmed up without much brain damage, if any, after this. But I have seen where it was really relevant was when a very well-meaning operating room circulating nurse, particularly if there had been, if somebody had come in with blood on their face and puking and snot and things coming out, trauma, or they were puking and this, and things got kind of messy there for a while, and they wanted to clean them off, and that's fine if it doesn't disturb what I'm doing for them. Notice I didn't say to them, for them. And quite often, you'd have one of these very officious, self-righteous individuals come over, and they'd have a wet rag full of cold water. They'd gone out into the sink out in the holding area there, and they'd just rinsed it out, and they were going to clean off this individual's face and so forth. And that's fine, but they're just going to slap it right off. Slap. Rub, 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 rub. Well, you only have to see them do that once and see somebody's heart rate drop down to about 10 or 20 you have to sort of put your arms up, maintain a barrier of safety around your patient to keep these very well-meaning individuals from slapping cold water on this individual's face. And because that does set off the diving, particularly if it's a younger, fit individual. I mean, because those are the folks where that sometimes happens. Well, often happens actually. Even if you give these guys a lot of atropine-like drugs, glycopyrrolate or atropine. I tend to use glycopyrrolate to keep their heart rate up. It would still, that intense vagal response from that diving reflex, fifth nerve, 10th nerve down, slow the heart. Of course, the tube's in, so it doesn't matter if their vocal cords try to close because they're not going to close around, they're not going to occlude that tube. So anyway, I sent this guy a sort of a fun, I was trying to be amusing and, sure hope that plunge didn't set off, sure glad that plunge didn't set off a diving reflex. And he said, he queried back. He was interested to know what that was. So Griffin 84, that's what that is. I'll have to send you a link here. Now we've got some other things to cover today, as is often the case. First of all, I want to say hello to Tony Pincham and his family as they're enjoying their Saturday evening out, having a Christmas dinner at the local over there in Worksop and Nottinghamshire in England. So happy Christmas, and then hope you enjoy your dinner and the various beverages that Tony has been working on over the last few weeks and months, couple of months anyway, weeks anyway, well, several weeks. And then I got a very nice email from a fellow over in Illinois that I emailed back and forth with. And I'd sent him a Christmas card. And then he got talking about just how for his family, it's a sort of trying time of year, this time of year for various reasons, which I won't go into here. Um, and I I got thinking about Christmas was always sort of a day of wretched excess and stuff when I grew up, and that might be viewed as good for some people, but it always was distressing for me. And and Christmas was always one of these days where people get together and there's a lot of unspoken stuff because you want to try to not be too much an overt open conflict, so you'd have these sort of half statements like, oh well, and then there'd be this sort of pause, and sometimes there'd be this half inhalation, half breath let out, and there's all this sort of glances going off to the side. Maybe not the eyes going up to the ceiling like I do, but yeah, quite honestly, I never particularly enjoyed Christmas. Some people don't. I do now because it's all, the way I deal with it, it's all concentrated on the religious significance of Christmas, not all the material stuff of Christmas. So I have notes today, guys. Um, so along that line, well, no, I'll save the along that line till the end of this. Um, I want to deal with something that several YouTubers have brought up, and this has always been sort of a major. Actually, several years back, it was a much more major annoyance for me than it has been this year or even the last couple of years. In fact, I think it's starting to die out. It's the habit of being, well, no, because a giant eagle was very much in evidence the other day. Excuse me. Oh, and in Walmart, too. Walmart better watch where their bread's buttered on. What side their bread's buttered on this one. Giant Eagle, not so much. That's all very upscale, yuppie types, Lowest price is my behind. Give me no. Come on. That's the most expensive store in this area. Good prices on the wine, though. State minimum. Yeah, well, the taxes from the state are what? Well, I'm becoming becalmed. Is this issue about happy holidays? In fact, it was great. The last time I was at Walmart, this woman said "Merry Christmas" to me. The checkout individual said Merry Christmas to me. And I said to her, I said, thank you for not saying Happy Holidays. And she sort of winked at me, which clearly told me that they had somehow been instructed to say Happy Holidays to people. And she was having none of it. Good for her. Good for her. Oh, it's Merry Christmas. It's not Happy Holidays. Now, if you're an atheist, Just get over it. You shouldn't care you shouldn't care either way. If you're Jewish, that shouldn't bother you at all, because you've got Hanukkah, and saying Merry Christmas in no way denigrates Hanukkah or the Jewish major festivals. Not at all. If you're Muslim, well, I don't know that much about Moslamism or Islamism. Well, I've read the Quran in English translation, but I can't see why that would bother the Muslims at all, because, it's the same one true God. We might have a different idea. Christians might have a different idea about how, the three persons situation, and which is the preferred messenger of God, but, that shouldn't be a big deal. Kwanzaa. Give me a break. Just give me a break. I'm not even going to go there. Well, and Buddhists and Hindus, obviously, Buddhists and Hindus are sort of left out in the ozone there, but I don't see why that should preclude anybody from saying Merry Christmas. Well, I will say, to address some stuff of substance that I've read, there was actually one woman that leaves a lot of stuff on my Facebook page. She wrote a fairly extended thing about how, she found Jesus in all the major religions, and well, no, Jesus isn't in all the major religions. God is in some of them, yes, perhaps all of them. The one God is at least in three of them. The one true God is at least in three of them. I can't. I have too much of a high Christology, hold too much of a high Christology to be perhaps quite that open to saying, it's okay to sort of, hi tree. Well, I love trees. I love trees. You've seen how I actually talk to my tree. But there is no way that I would include them in, religion. I don't want to dig myself into too deep a hole here, because I can feel the dirt going out on either side here right about now. But this idea that you have to embrace everything that is actively contrary to your very basic nature. I'm not into that. I'm not into that. That doesn't mean you have to go burn down somebody's house about it, or nail them to the wall, or hang them from a tree. Just means, don't say I can't say something. Go ahead and say something. Go ahead and say what you want. I'll try to shut up and be civil about it. That's called living in the United States, guys. inclusiveness. Well, that's okay. No, it's one thing to be inclusive in the sense of not ejecting people from society. It's another thing to say you have to. Oh, I don't know. I get so tired of all this bullshit. It just becomes tiresome. Now, here's the thing that's going to probably take even longer. Well, this is standard for me. It's like a college class. It's 40 minutes long, probably, isn't it? There's this thing about Santa Claus. And how did this Santa Claus thing start? Well, there were about three strands of thought that converged. Well, one strand of thought was from our rector's newsletter. Actually, it had happened. Well, let's put it this way. We'll just get right to it. I feel like a damn fool for saying this. That's not the first time I've gonna felt like a damn fool, is it? I believed, quote, believed in Santa Claus till I was about 8 years old. Which meant basically because I was about 9 years old. Since I was, my birthday's in January. And when I found out that there was no such entity as Santa Claus, and no, Virginia, there is no such thing as Santa Claus. Bear that in mind. I felt like a damn fool. I also felt kind of betrayed. Because, my parents always treated my sister and myself as, fairly adulty-like. There was very little deception that went on. Things were always fairly, above board, very open, and I think it's fairly clear to you all by now if you've watched any of my stuff for any length of time. I jumped right in. I was reading by the age of 3.5 and 4. I was reading the newspaper time I was 4.5. I remember reading about the election in 1956. What's this Adlai Stevenson bullshit? I remember thinking that, actually. I'm not projecting that back. Hell, they were both bald-headed, weren't they? Eisenhower and Stevenson were both bald-headed. How can you tell them apart? They all look the same. But when you heard them talk on the TV, you could tell the difference. Well, they were both kind of wet, actually. But I think Eisenhower was sort of cultivating being wet to keep all the lefties off his skin. Well, how did we get into this? We're talking about Santa Claus deceiving kids, or parents deceiving kids about Santa Claus, more accurately. And so, our rector wrote it. He writes a weekly email. This is going to be one of his last. This was actually his next to last weekly email, and he brought Santa Claus in. I'm not going to pull the thing up and try to read it to you, but I sent him a response and about being deceived and so forth. And he wrote back and he says, well, his daughter, basically felt the same way I did. She felt she had been deceived and lied to. And then the younger, the boy, the son, is is about 2.5 years, 2 years younger, and he says, well, he's still blissfully unaware. He hopes. Interestingly, he said that he had been older than I was, which I was almost 9. And he says my mother was heartbroken when she found out I had learned the truth. Interesting word, that, the truth. The truth. And it says his brothers and sisters, he was like the oldest of 7 or 8 or 9 kids. Excuse me. They learned the truth somewhat later, or somewhat younger than he did. I guess his mother must have been more heartbroken at that point. I don't know. I asked the father of my goddaughter, this friend of mine who's now dead, God bless him. I think she was around 6 at the time. And I said, does she still believe in Santa Claus? And he seemed absolutely taken aback by the question. He sort of got into that benign, Buddha-like state he occasionally got into. His wife, of course. Oh, good Lord, you two people, you and your wife are incredibly intelligent people. Clearly, this daughter is going to be an incredibly intelligent child, and now a young woman, incredibly intelligent young woman. Why would you engage in a deliberate deception? I kept my mouth shut. Yes, highly improbable as that sounds, I did keep my mouth shut. It's just so distressing to me to see kids bamboozled this way. It really, obviously, I'm in a minority, a very small minority. I understand that. That doesn't mean I'm not right, though. It just means I'm in a small minority. Okay, well. Oh, well, there was a piece today in the Wall Street Journal, which actually was a fairly serious piece, by a fellow that he was discussing an exchange between a theologian out of Duke Divinity School and some other people about this one fellow had postulated that Santa Claus was actually, could be used as sort of a form of Jesus-Lite, L-I-T-E, Jesus-Lite, L-I-T-E, to, actually, it was kind of like a belief or a faith exercise for kids to, he was talking about, kids that have been told about Jesus Christ, and who believed in Santa Claus, and their parents had told them both parents told them both about Jesus Christ and Santa Claus. Maybe not in that order, but whatever. And then when they found out that Santa Claus was, not real, then maybe they thought Jesus Christ was not real. And so, well, easiest way to do that is don't get into the Santa Claus thing to start with. But this fellow was postulating that you know, this can be used as a way to develop a more nuanced understanding of faith and belief. And okay, that's all right, fine. It's a legitimate point. I can't say as I agree with it. I don't disagree with it. I don't think it's I think it misses the real point. The real point being that Santa Claus doesn't exist. So why do you even bother telling your kids about something that doesn't exist? Here, let me repeat that. Santa Claus doesn't exist. So why do you bother telling your kids about something that doesn't exist? I love a good story, probably more than the next guy. But I know it's a story. See, I know it's a story. And you tell kids a lot of stories, and they know they're stories. Oh, sure. You tell them stories. But Santa Claus is never presented to kids as a story. It's presented to a kid as a fact. However highly improbable, but a fact. I just disagree with that. I resented being bamboozled that way. All right, well, I've had my say. Now, that's pretty much it. There was one other thing. Santa Claus. Sandy Claus. Ho, ho, ho. Well, since I can't recall it readily to mind, I'm going to shut up and say bye-bye, YouTube. All righty. Have a happy Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and undoubtedly I'm going to be back before that time, but it's kind of pro forma here this time of year. And all right.